Hi, it's Alan here. There's a question in the forums about how to do panning and zooming. So I thought I'd just do a quick demo of how I do it on some scenes. So I'm going to show you one I've already pre-built. I'm just going to play it first, and this is going to do a sideways pan. So if we let it rip, you can see the image and the two characters move slightly to the side. How that worked is I've got my first character here. It's got a transform position X, and you can see that I've done a blend. That is, I've grabbed the top corner and I've dragged it in, so you get this graduated blend. This is a corner where I've got it at, and I could drag it back and forwards, and that will change how long it takes. So if I do that, it'll end up in the same position. But I don't know if you noticed, but Hank moves across a lot faster, which is not the desired sort of result. So that's why all of these blends, if I just move that to the end, actually that one doesn't quite line up. It should line up there. This should line up. Come on, you can do it there. And so we've got the start points all lining up exactly of the blend, and the end points all lining up, and that will cause all three, so that the background image, this bottom one is actually the background image, and the background image is being transformed in the same way. But I'm going to go through this in greater detail, show you how to do it yourself with another one. But I'm going to add another character in here, which is Liana, just to show you can do a bit more complicated things as well. So with Liana, you'll notice that there's I've blended the X, I've layered multiple blends, I've also blended the Y, and I've done a scale. And this combination, then you'll actually see Liana step up and walk towards the camera getting bigger. And the reason she's getting bigger is because of the scale blend, which is around about here. So let's see how this looks. So I've got the camera pan, Liana stands up, let's change the Y.
You two are on the debating team together? Really?
Sure thing. It's always...
So hopefully you saw that the scale came into effect. The character got bigger as it moved towards, and so that was Liana having this scale blend here. And so it's just a matter of highlighting all the values. And as I said, I'll show you how to actually set one of these ones up, but I just thought I'd show that you can actually get reasonably complicated scenes with multiple blends and so forth all laid on top of each other. But I'm not going to try and rebuild that scene. I'm going to do something a little bit simpler. So I'm just going to start close some of this down. I'm going to create a new scene. Let me start with a nice blank one. So the actual question in the forums was saying, how do you zoom in on one side of the image? Let's call it test. So I've just got a new scene over here. Where's my mouse gone? I'm going to import the artwork. It had an image on the forum, so I thought I may as well use that. Excuse me while I find it again. It was in the extra. Here we go. So I thought I might as well use the image. So I've just imported that background image as a puppet and dragged that image onto the scene. And so it's a bit too big to fit, so we can come over here. It's just a normal puppet. So we pick the scale, and I can set the scale factor to fit the image. But the actual request was just to zoom in on one side, pan across, and then come down. So I'm actually going to start from this zoom, but I'm actually going to zoom in on this sign and then pan across the other sign and then go down to that one down there. We'll see if we do all of it, but we'll get a bit of the idea. Okay, so how do I start off? Well, I've got it in my default start position. In order to zoom in on this, I'm going to turn off, I should just move this across a little bit. I'm going to turn off all the recorders. All I'm going to be using is transform. In fact, you could actually delete all these other behaviors. You really don't need them for this particular case. If you want to delete, you can come over here and start saying, well, I don't. There's a little menu thing here, and you can start, oops, wrong button. Eye gaze. You can remove the behavior because it's on the background image. It doesn't have eyes. It doesn't have a face. but I'm not going to bother it. So you can remove the things you don't need. You definitely need the transform, however. And one way of moving the background around is actually if I come down here and I drop a dragger on it. It's going to rig. Oh, that's right. You've actually got to put it onto a nested group, and this is only one simple artwork. But if I actually loaded this up into like a Photoshop file or similar and actually had a parent root group, I could actually drop a dragger onto it, and then I could drag it around the scene to get the actual things. But because there's no groups in it, I can't actually put a dragger or anything on it. So, can I just put a dragger on that one? I'm just going to make the origin whacked dragger. Thank you very much. Go away on here, and then oops. If I go back to the chord window. Oh, got to activate the dragger. Yeah. You can actually set it up, but as I say, I think you actually need to set it up with a group inside the image. So just ignore that. Okay, so how to then can I do it with a not doing, like if I just want to do the scale, if I want to zoom in on this text over here, I've actually got to, I'm going to start from this default scale, but I'm actually going to change the X, Y, and scale. So I've armed all three. Now the default for this puppet is all good. Now that I've armed these three values, if I change their values, next time I start a recording, it will grab that new value. So what I'm going to do is then work out what scale I want, and I'm basically just adjusting those values to position X, just trying to get it right so it's in the center of the scene. So I might say now I want to zoom in a little bit more. Now you can fiddle around to decide whether to use anchor point X and Y or position X and Y. One gets applied before the scale, one gets afterwards. So normally actually I use position these ones. Oops. No, I'll just keep going. Okay, so we've got the image there. So that's what I want to do. I want to pan across. So you might say, okay, so I've typed in these new values. I'm doing Control R to start a recording. I just record it for a moment, and then if I want to do the pan for say, let's say like 2 seconds, let me just zoom in a little bit. Let's say I want to do the pan for exactly 2 seconds. I can drag these out to the 2 second mark, and now I've got this recording. It doesn't, the values don't change during the recording. They just jump straight to that value. So what I can now do is grab this dragger in the top. It was up in the top left corner, and I dragged it over to the right. And so now you might notice that's how it started off. And if I start playing, it zoomed in. If that zoom was too fast, then I just change the length of this drag. If I sort of move it out to like 3 seconds and grab that dragger for all three. It's a little bit hard to see, but the zoom was actually a little bit slower then. But I'm just going to go back to the 2 seconds. I'm then going to drag this out. So the value, so the blend still only goes into 2 seconds, which will zoom in. But what I then want to do is I want to do another recording because I want to zoom over to the other side. Now you might notice that if I'm around here, when I come over to here, it's sort of going back to the original position because I've got these three armed. If I disarm, it'll show me the zoomed in, it'll show me the current value, but when they're armed, it won't show me the current values, and so that can make it a little bit hard and tricky to layer on top. There's a few ways to do that. One, disarm it and have a look, and maybe even work out the new coordinates and write them down on a bit of paper. And frankly, that's what I normally do. I just write it down on a bit of paper. But there is another way, which is I got from someone in the forums, which is basically to add another behavior. Where is it? So if I come over here and what am I doing? My brain's gone blank for a moment. Oh, I'm getting myself a little bit confused. My apologies. But oh, it's down here. Sort of, I pull this down just to give myself a bit more room at the top. Come on, you can do it. So if I click on the puppet, it's just in the wrong window. That's what it was. I can add another behavior to it. So I'm going to add another transform behavior, and it gave it a really great name of transform 2, which I'm happy with. And so what I'm going to do is, coming back up to here, is to take, select my timeline, and I'm going to disarm the first one. Well, you can do it. And then I'm going to, I don't need to do any scale, I'm just going to transpose across this time. Oops, I don't want to do that, I want to do position. I'm actually just going to slide across, but what I'm going to do this time is I'm recording, because it's a second behavior, it's showing me the values of the current one because this one is not armed. If I arm it, it'll go back to that position, which is not the current value, but if I disarm that one, I can now record the second behavior on top, and so it allows me to line it exactly up, get it exactly right. And so I can say, great, well, I want to go across to the picture on the other side, so it's in the middle. And so that's where I want to end up. So now I'm going to do a record, which is going to record transform number 2. And it's going to apply that over the top. Now I'm going to drag that out to, say, 5 seconds. So let's see how that goes. So it's going to zoom in, and it jumps over the new value because I didn't do the blend. Whoops, missed. So I grabbed it by the edge, then I'm going to grab it in that corner to get the blends to come out right. So let's have a look at this one now. So it goes up there, slides across to the other side, and then as soon as that finished, it goes back to the default, which is why it jumped back to the other side. So we've got to drag this edge out. So it zooms in because it's doing the scale as well. It's going off the other side. And so I didn't actually need to do a Y value at all because the Y value didn't change for that. Moving across the one, I'll just get rid of that one. And then I want to do a final one. What I'm going to do is disarm transform 2 and rearm transform 1, but not the scale. That's not going to work. I think if I'd done it with absolute anchor point XY, that probably would have worked. Oh well. So you can just do it with one transform. So I'm going to go back and do it this way. And so what I'm going to do is to work out, I'm going to do another recording of the same one. But you'll notice it's come over to here. If I disable it, that's where it really is, but because I armed it, it's hiding the current values, so it's jumped back over here. But I can just ignore it and just sort of say, well, where do I want to end up? I want it to end up on the clock, I think was the request. And so I'm just adjusting the X and the Y, so the clock. And I might say, well, I also want to see, as soon as I change these values, it went and lost my the values I just set up, which is a pain. So you've got to make sure you arm the right things first. So just trying again. I'm just zooming it down. Position, getting it nice in the middle. Scale. Let's just zoom in on it. If I'd use the anchor point, that scale I think works a little bit better. My bad, but I'm not going to record it. So that's where I want to end up. So I'm just going to do a recording. Don't have to get it exactly right. I'm then going to drag that out to the length I want. It should be another 2 seconds. I'm going to grab that thing up in the top corner and blend them. And so hopefully goes and pans across, and then it should pan diagonally down and zoom in a bit on the camera. Oh, and I forgot to grab that edge to bring that across, just to extend it out. So let's do that last bit again, comes down on the. Now if I wanted to come down and zoom in on the camera later on, the clock, saying camera, clock, whoops, then I just select the scale transform. And I just dragged it along. So just over here, duration, let's make it 10 seconds. And so let's do that again. Let's go pan down to the bottom, and then it zooms in afterwards. So that's how you can use blends to do nice transitions. And by doing a blend, it sort of starts off a bit slowly and ends a bit slowly, so it sort of eases through them. If you want a perfectly linear blend, you can't. It's always going to do this curve at the moment. It's just built into it. Okay, so that's a simple sort of one. Then you might say, well, great, but how do I put a puppet on top of that? Well, this is where it gets painful. The more characters you put on top, how am I going to grab? Sorry, grab there's Sam. So I'm going to put Sam into the scene as well. So if I want him to pan around the place, let's come back to the beginning. And let's make him a little bit smaller and change. Move him down a little bit. It's a little bit sluggish, my little computer trying to keep up. So if I want him in the same spot as I pan around the scene, well, there is no easy way to do it. It's a matter of redoing all these transforms and just getting them all to line up. And so I'm going to do the same thing and say, okay, that's his good starting position. I'm just holding down the Alt and using the wheel on my mouse. I'm going to disable the thing, put the dragger on. I'm going to drag his arms down because he looks a bit silly like that. Just putting the arms down by his body. Try to make it look like his hands are in his pocket. Record hand positions. I'm not going to bother changing them, so I'm just going to record a moment and then drag it all the way out. Great. I often do his elbows and wrist. It just stops a little bit of jumpies, makes them a bit more solid. And then what I want to do, though, is as we zoom on in this corner, how do I get him to zoom and be correct at the same time? Well, if I had written down all the scale values, I could actually work out what the old and new scale value was. Because I didn't, what else can I do? Well, this is where I find little tricks like just looking at the position of his head with respect to, like, it's in the middle of the light cone, it's a little bit above the bottom of that picture in the background, his elbows at the edge of the table. And so I'm looking at some of these things in the background just so I work out where he is. And sometimes I'll actually position him a little bit differently just to make it a bit easier for myself. So if I put him, oops, it's a Y, I'm going to grab the X, I'm going to stick him right in the middle of underneath that light. Just makes it a little bit easier. And I'm going to cheat. So I'm going to put his hair at exactly the bottom of the picture just because it's going to make my life a little bit easier. Okay, so then what we're going to do is then, as we zoom in, we've got to say, okay, so what should his position and scale factor be? Well, so make this window a little bit bigger. Oops. I can see more around here, and if you remember, his head was meant to be around about here, just touching the bottom of that, and in the overall space. So come back to the beginning there. You can sort of see that about the bottom of that there is about his eyebrows, and so I'm just trying to find registration points on the picture. So I come back over here, and so when I get to this particular position for Sam, I'm going to want to change his X, Y, and scale. I'm going to move him, oops, wrong way. So it's around about there. Going to scale him up. So his eyebrows are meant to be about the bottom of that picture. You need to go down a little bit more. You just scale him a little bit smaller. So you can just see that I'm just fiddling around a little bit trying to get this right. And then, not sure what's going on there. Just jumping around a little bit too fast. And his head was in the middle of the cone of light. And so that's about roughly where I want him to end up anyway. So I can sort of see the picture behind. He's around about touching the bottom. His eyebrows are there. He might need to go down just a... Oops, I'm an idiot. I'd armed position X and Y, and I'm adjusting the anchor positions, which is no use whatsoever. I've got to change the armed values. Otherwise, I'm just changing the default position for the puppet. Okay, so let's go back over here. Something like that. Scale. Whoops, going crazy. Use position Y. Sorry, I'm going to do this all again. Okay, so it needs to be a bit bigger. I'm guessing about there. So eyebrows are touching, lining up with the bottom of this green blob. His hairs are touching the top, so you have to scale just a little bit bigger. You might say, isn't there a more efficient way? Probably, but you get a little bit of the idea. So I get him worked out. I've now got the value set, and so I'm going to do a record. Now, if I drag that dragger back to the beginning, I'm going to lose these values. It resets them. So even though I really want the recording from the beginning, I'm not going to touch anything. I'm going to record those new positions, stop the recording, and I'm going to just drag it across over here and then extend it out to the other end. I'm going to go up in the top corner, adjust the blend, and I'm going to line it up exactly with the other blend. So what should happen then, if I disarm, I've stuffed him up, haven't I? If I go back to the beginning, his default position Y was around about there. Sorry about that. So you can see just by lining up the zooms, they're both zooming together, and it was all just based on working out where that endpoint should be lined up with there, and then it's going to pan over to here, so I've got to do another one over to around about here, where I'm going to just keep all these armed, but what I need now is his X position. Oops. Silly me. I didn't arm it. So I've got to get his arm it first. I've got to bring his X position is over the other side. I'm not recording new values of Y of scale. I'm only going to be changing the X, and of course when I ticked them it lost my value. So I come back over here. His head was roughly in the middle. So I'm going to start recording that. And so I'm just going to record his new exposition. That's going to start from where the old one finished. I'm going to drag out that top little corner blend, and so now hopefully we get to zoom in, pan across, and I didn't get that very accurate. Ah, silly me. There was two blends here. So here is the first blend, and then this was the other second blend to go down and focus on the clock. So I got this one in the wrong spot, didn't I? Of course you saw that, because I'm sure you're all paying attention. Okay, so I brought it back in line there, and so now we should have the zoom in, pan across, and I didn't get the third one yet right, but I'm going to leave that for an exercise for you guys. You can see that it at least gets to that stage. And so you just got to keep laying on top, and you can do puppet after puppet, just doing exactly the same thing for every single puppet. It's a little bit of a pain, but it does work, and then you don't have to worry about other ones. So do you have alternatives? Well, if you listened this far in, congratulations. There are some alternatives. I mentioned the dragging. You can have a go at doing that. You just need to put in like a Photoshop file with a group, like drop the image in as a sublayer, or an Illustrator as a sublayer, and then you can put a dragger on it, and you can grab it via the mouse, and like just like dragging his hand, but you can actually drag the whole background scene. I tend to find though on my laptop it's not really fast enough, and so when I try and do a hand blend, it often jumps around a little bit because the computer doesn't pick up every single frame. A faster computer would probably do a better job there. I do it sometimes though. It's quite useful. So I'm not saying never do it. What else? I had some notes over here. Yes, okay. So there is one other approach. I'm not going to demonstrate it. I'll just describe it briefly. And what that approach is not to do any of these sorts of things inside the scene, and so you just do the zoomed out image like this one, and then you drag this scene. You can actually drag this scene icon here and drop it into After Effects, probably a Premiere Pro as well, I'm guessing, and that will create a dynamic link, and so After Effects will actually point back to this project. You can then do keying in After Effects, and so I'm pretty sure you can scale and zoom. Well, zooming is scaling, and adjust the base offset within After Effects, and so it actually moves around. And by doing dynamic linking, it'll actually get all the resolution all worked out, I believe, and get all that correct. So that is another way of doing it, just by using After Effects, and you can look up how to do pans and keying and stuff in After Effects. I just find it on my little laptop, After Effects is too slow for me. You can also render this video out and then load the video file in, like an MP4 file, and then basically pan and keyframe that as well. You got to worry about that a little bit more though, because when you zoom in, you may start to see pixelization because the movie's at a particular resolution, and when you zoom in, it's just zooming in on the image, and so the pixel sizes are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger the more you zoom in. That won't happen if you use dynamic linking. Dynamic linking, I'm pretty sure, computes it all correctly for you, so dynamic linking is better there. But I normally do all the pans just straight inside Character Animator like this myself. Yeah, it works, and then I don't have to use more tools, because as I said, I just found After Effects a bit too sluggish, whereas here it's